past meetings.
Yes. So tonight is Wednesday, May 29th. This is Management 3025. That's so I'll know what the hell I'm looking at when I turn on video. Do I record and post most classes? I will record and post all classes, at least the material that I think is relevant, pertinent, and omitting the parts where I look stupid. Okay. Your question was, what about the math or calculation portion of this course? I have suggested you will need a financial calculator. I have suggested the Texas Instruments Business Analyst 2. It is available in Walmart for around $30, and it's available as a smartphone app for about $15. You will use it here, and as one of the former students was saying about our finance class, you'll use it in the finance class. You like that? Is that a ringtone? It's called Take 5. Excuse me.
Take.
Okay, let's try it again. We were talking about the quantitative aspects, the calculations for this course. A financial calculator. A financial calculator has the present value, future value, PV, FV, PMT type buttons on it. That's your key. You'll use it in this course lightly. You'll use it in finance heavily, and you may use it in the managerial econ class. As far as what you'll be calculating, it'll be things like if you put $100 in the bank today and leave it there for 7 years at 15%, how much money will you have? And it's truly, with a calculator, it's just a matter of mashing buttons. And once you see that, then we can complicate the problems a little bit. I don't think it'll be overly challenging. I've got handouts and videos on this calculator. You can get started on those anytime. You will be asked to perform on the final exam. That's where you'll see the questions on it. So if you want to start early and practice and bring questions to class, put them on the discussion forum, email them to me, we can solve those problems. I don't think it's overly complicated. Okay? So that's the quantitative aspect of the course.
Thank you.
You bet. Any other questions, comments? Well, let's get started on our task tonight. I was going to say, I only get to see you about 5 or 6 times during the entire term. And you can see from the turnout, not everybody shows up. I try to take the things that I think are going to be fairly important and bring them to you here. Tonight we're going to do something called the DISC, D-I-S-C profile. It's a personality profile that lets you take a look at yourself based on your responses to some questions and understand, according to their paradigm of different personality types, what is your type. Then perhaps by comparison you can think of the people in your lives, what personality types are they? And when you have 2 different personality types, sometimes there's a real gap in their communication. There's a real gap in the way they make decisions. There's a real gap in the things that they think are important. If we can understand that, I think we take a giant step forward towards what I consider, at least for most operational levels, the most important part of management. And management is getting things done through people. And the better you and I can understand other people and ourselves, the better job we can do of it. That's why you'll find a lot of your assignments are very reflective. They ask you about yourself and how you feel about this, or what would you do here. If you can understand yourself, you can make a good stride towards understanding others. If you can learn how to plan things like your academic plan, remember that? That's the one you had to turn in. If you can make a decent academic plan for yourself and recognize all that that encompasses, I think you're a good step down the road towards making a plan for an organization. Where are we now? What do we get done? What do we need to get done? Where do we want to be? Those kind of things. So a lot of the things I'm asking you to do in this course that are directed towards you personally are very transferable into using them in an organizational setting as well. So that's my goal. The DISC profile tonight, I have them up here. I'm asking you for a $5 contribution to pay for these. These are many years old and I never used them. I went online today to check to see if I could find some more, and they're running anywhere from $10 to $20 a piece. So we'll use them up and then we'll figure out what to do. I've been using the DISC profile for over 15 years. I've taught seminars with it, I've consulted with it. I think it's one of the quickest, easiest, and most versatile instruments you can use to better understand human interaction. What I'm going to give you is a closed booklet. I don't want you to open it till I tell you to. When you do open it, the first page is going to be a series of blocks of statements. Each block will have 4 statements in it. And it will have places where you mark under most or least. And I will ask you, pick out the one statement that most describes you, and whatever that is, color that in. And then pick out the statement that is least descriptive of you, color that in. Then proceed to the next block of statements and keep going. It's a very quick process. I'm not going to give you time to think about it. I want your first instinctive response. Okay, it's a forced response. We get much better accuracy that way. You'll fill out all of these blocks of statements, I think there's 24 of them, as quickly as you can, but certainly within 7 minutes, and I'll be telling you the time. As soon as you do that, you can either wait, and I will explain how to score it, or you can open up to the next page, and it will give you directions on how to go ahead and calculate your scores in the various categories. Okay? Now when you do mark these little statements, mark them firmly because it transfers through to the page behind it. All right? Pen or pencil, doesn't matter. But I want to preface this by asking you to put yourself into a particular mindset. Because many times we are one person at work and we're a different person at home or socially. I want you to use this tonight as an indicator of your working personality style. So I want you to think for a few minutes about the various jobs you've had. The first job you ever had. Think about the first boss you ever had. Think about the best boss. What made that person the best boss you ever had? Best person you ever worked for. Yeah, anybody here ever worked for a jerk? Yeah, you've been around the block more than about once, you worked for a jerk. There's a lot of them out there. What made that person such a jerk? What was so uncomfortable or unpleasant about working with that person? What's the worst work environment you've ever worked in? Anybody want to take a stab at that for a second? Worst work environment.
I'm a horticulturalist by trade, and I have a lot of certifications that I've worked very hard for.
Yeah.
And I was hired because of those certifications, and then the nursery that I worked at was absolutely filthy. The employees were uncooperative, and the owners I would have something sold in a landscape plan, and the owners would say, oh no, we don't want to do it that way. Why don't you do it this way? And I was like, why did you hire me?
Yeah.
Because it was for my knowledge and expertise that they wanted me, and yet they countermanded everything that I said. So
we could take off and talk for an hour just on that. You know? One of the things to come out of that strikes me is every time you go to a job interview, that's a two-way interview. You should be interviewing them to see whether or not you want to work there.
And I didn't do that.
Yeah, exactly. Know the feeling. Anybody else? Particularly horrendous work environment or supervisory experience?
I'll share briefly. I was working for this retail store as a hiring manager and assistant manager, and I only stayed there for a year, and the main issues that I had with them was harassment to my employees from upper management, district management,
Right.
and discrimination. They were, but mainly, they were, because I can take a lot, but if they're screaming on the phone and my employees are listening pretty much to what they're, the threats and all that, then I have 30, 40 employees freaking out because they think they might not have a job.
Right.
But the discrimination part, they wanted me to do legal things, and one day I just said, okay, that's enough, the money is good, but I'm not going to jail for anyone,
Good.
I'm not doing
Good.
it. And
One of the things we got to
I
all
was in the
remember
car
is,
and
what's the first thing you do when you get your first job?
what's the question?
What's the first thing you do when you get your first job?
What your fault?
Start looking for your next one. Because we want to be in the position, each and every one of us, that if we get into a difficult situation, we have options.
I just went back to school.
Yeah, what happens to too many people is they take a job because they need it. And then the money gets decent enough that now they're in debt, they got mortgage payments, house payments, et cetera, they can't afford to quit. And when you get an employee like that, you can work them to death because they can't afford to quit. They don't necessarily give you quality work, but they'll do enough to get by. That's not a very satisfactory situation for anybody. So that's just a rule of thumb. How do you make sure you have your next job lined up? Where are the best jobs in America advertised?
They're not.
They're not. Why?
Because they don't want to open it up to everybody, so they have to weed through all the
Just exactly. You have to weed through so many people to find the one you hope will work. How do you find your better employees?
Network, word of mouth.
Networking, word of mouth, recommendations from your other trusted employees, etc. So we got to be smart about the way we approach this. But now, rather than just an employee, turn that around as a manager. The manager creates the environment. Okay. And the higher up you are, the larger the environment you are. We call managers force multipliers. A good manager can take 4 people and get a hell of a lot of work out of them, the equivalent work of 6 or 8 people. A poor manager can take 4 people and get the productivity of maybe a half a person. They can destroy it. And so management, the term management is kind of trite, but it's awfully important too. Managing people effectively, understanding those people. Okay? Think about some of the conflicts you've had, preferably at work, you know, when you run into people who are jerks, or when you run into people it's very comfortable to work with. But I want you to get your mindset into you in your work environment, in your work experiences, in your work history. Okay? With that in mind, I'm going to take this booklet, give you each one, and I'm going to tell you when to open it and begin. And at that time, I'll restart the video and we'll start talking about the results, okay? Cool. All right, at this point, you have finished the tabulation and you have graphed the reference points, the 3 graphs that you have to prepare. Looking at your graphs, let's look first at graph number 3. Graph number 3 is generally the most revealing, the most indicative of your typical behavior and communication style. When you look at the graph, you've got the columns for the D, I, S, and C, and you've got a heavy dark line that's about halfway along. I want you to identify the 1 or 2 or 3 points that are above the halfway line. Suppose this graph right here. Suppose this graph looked like this. It's got a low D, a high I, an S, and a C. It's only got 2 values above the halfway line. We pick the highest one first and we say this is an IS personality. Okay? If the C value had been above the line, we would call that an ISC personality. So you see how I'm going to identify you and ask you to use that terminology with me, right? So your highest value is your primary personality type. If you have other values above the midway line, include those in your self-description of your personality style. And again, we're going to use graph 3 as a point of beginning. So let me ask you very quickly. Identifying your primary style, the one that's highest. How many in this room are D personalities? D's, 1, 2, 3. How many are I's? 1, 2. How many 3? How many S's? 2. And how many C's?
My I and C was
3.
tied.
Okay, good enough. All right, let's talk about what these mean, okay? There is a handout, and I think it's on Canvas. If it's not, it will be by tomorrow. It's a document that I've prepared that describes the different styles, and it will reiterate a lot of what I'm going to say right now. So you don't need to take real careful notes. But here's what we're looking at. We're looking at 2 spectrums of emphasis. The first one, the vertical spectrum, is at this end, people who are very task-oriented. These are the personality types that are very focused on what I can do, what you can do, what I have done. Very focused on get it done. Complete the work. Get it done. How good are you? At the opposite end of that spectrum, there are people who are more focused on relationships. Who are you? Who am I? Where are you from? What do you like to do? They're very social people. You see the difference? Now you're going to be somewhere along this spectrum, and I'm not going to let you say you're in the middle, okay? I want you to think in terms of, are you primarily task-oriented or relationship-oriented, okay? And your personality profile will tell us a good bit about that. The other spectrum on this side shows us people who are results-oriented. They focused on the finished work. In other words, they're focused on, let's get it done, whatever we're doing, let's get it over with, versus people who are process-oriented. They don't want to get started on something until they know exactly what they're going to do. They want to get all the parts laid out. They want to make sure they follow exactly the right procedure and do it the right way. Whereas over on this end, they're saying, just do it now, we'll fix it later. All right? Now this describes the four personality styles, the D, the I, the S, and the C. The D personality is this quadrant up here. If you're a strong D personality, you are typically very focused on getting results. You measure yourself and others by what they can do or have done. Talk doesn't carry much weight. If you can't do it, it don't count. D personalities, we call them the drivers. There's only, in the general population, around 3% of the population is D personalities. The positive side of a D is they get it done. You give them a job, they get it done. Usually, they're pretty damned competent, too. They're pretty good at getting it done. So, they're kind of a go-to person. When you're really under a deadline, it's got to happen right now, and you've got to get somebody who can guarantee you it'll get done, you go to the D personality. So, they are a true asset. They do have some negative sides if they're very strong Ds, though. Their negative side, suppose the D is operating up in here somewhere, they're very task-oriented, very results-oriented. What are they not?
People-oriented.
They're not real relationship-oriented or detail-oriented. And so they tend to get things done, but then we need to send someone along behind them to pick up the dead bodies and the bruised egos. Okay? They're not real strong on relationship skills. They're very direct. They'll tell you, you ask them what do they think, they're right in your face. What do I think? I think that shirt looks ridiculous. They're not worried about your feelings, they're just being honest. They're not trying to hurt your feelings, but you ask for a response, they give you the direct response. Okay? Now, if you're not that kind of person, it may sound like they're being kind of rude, or kind of in your face, or like they don't really like you very much. But they don't mean to be that way, usually. They're just direct. And they expect you to be the same way with them. We'll see the contrast to that in a minute. That's the D personality. I'm going to talk about the D at an extreme. Most of the D personalities we run into are not extreme, but they still have some of those characteristics. If we go around the quadrant, down here we have people who are very results-oriented, but also very social, very relationship-oriented. That's the I personality. Okay? This is the inspiring personality. The person who typically likes to talk a lot, likes to be the focus of attention, great in performing arts. You need to have a little bit of an I personality, I think, to be a teacher, because you're in front of people and you enjoy that. You draw energy from it. You can spot eyes in a room because they're the ones that are talking. And they get a real rush out of people paying attention to them. Okay? Eyes can be very strong leaders because people like to listen to them and tend to want to follow them and go along with them. Eyes can also turn into politicians by the same regard. What does an eye lack? No attention to detail and no task orientation. So they tend to talk a lot and not get a hell of a lot done. Okay? If you put two eyes together and tell them to come up with a plan, they'll be back tomorrow or the day after because they got a lot to talk about first. Okay? As we go on around, we have people who are very relationship oriented and oriented towards the process. These people tend to be pretty good listeners. They tend to emphasize, let's go along, get along. If there's some discord in personalities, they tend to be the peacemakers that try to fix it. And this is the S personality. S stands for stable. About 69% of the population types as S's, which is kind of a good thing. They're go along, get along.
What's the percentage for the eyes?
What do you suppose the percentage is of I's?
7%? 15?
No.
12? 7?
I'm trying to remember so I don't get my numbers mixed up. I think it's 17. Because the C up here was the remaining 11. I may have those two numbers reversed. I'll check them. But the S personality is the quiet, go along, get along, team player. What do you want me to do? How can I help? And you don't typically think of them maybe as being inspiring, forceful leaders. But we'll find out that that's not always the case. Finally, what do we know about a C personality? They're oriented towards the work they have to do and getting it exactly right. C stands for compliance. They want to know, what are the rules? How are you going to measure me? And I will follow those rules. I will do it the way it's supposed to be done. So let me give you a few examples to illustrate some of this, okay? If you got a new piece of equipment, electronic equipment, how would you teach yourself how to operate it? People who are results-oriented will take the instruction manual, throw it over here, and start pushing buttons.
Yeah.
They're going to figure it out. My son's one of those. Drives me crazy.
That sounds fun.
I don't care for it. But people who are more process-oriented will pick up the manual and go through it one page at a time, checking out the buttons. It'll take them a long time to get it right, but they'll know everything about the damn thing. Okay? Who do you think would make a good accountant? The C personality. Attention to detail. Meticulous attention to detail. Okay? If you go at the diagonals, you see sort of the opposites. And you can be a CI personality. It just means that you tend to fluctuate in one mode and then into the other, depending on the circumstance. Don't find too many who are a D and an S combined, but we do find a few. But the D and the S are antithetical in a sense. The S, if you're going to talk to an S, you want to kind of preface your remarks with some cushioning statements. How you doing today? Let them relax and warm up, and then get into the meat of the conversation. Not so with a D. You know, you go in to talk to your boss and he's a D, he does not want to talk about the weather. He does not want to hear about your damn golf game. He wants to know what's on your mind. And if you go in there instead and say, hey, Buzz, how you doing, man? I had a great time playing golf yesterday. How about you like playing? Shut the hell up. What's on your mind? That's what's going through his mind. Now, if you know this about your boss, you know how to approach him, and you immediately foster better communication. If you don't know that about your boss, he thinks you're an idiot. Likewise, if you're an S and he comes in to talk to you, how do you suppose he talks to you? Suppose you're the boss. He comes in, I got a question about click, 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 what should I do? How do you want me to do this? And he wants a yes or no, black or white, now or you know, whatever answer. And it does not want to sit around and chit-chat. Okay? And if you recognize the difference in your communication styles, and this is the object of the game, you become like a chameleon. You change your color according to your environment. If you can flex your style over to be more like his, you will have a better relationship, better communication, and you'll build trust faster. Okay? So I want you to understand all four styles, because one of your competencies is going to be identifying at least 6 different people in your lives and identify what their style is and what your preferred method of approaching them and communicating them should be.
I just want to clarify, did I hear that right? That if you pretend in a direction, you establish more trust?
I don't want you to take it as being, what's the word, hypocritical. You have got to, first of all, bottom belief, if you don't have a genuine concern for people, pick another job, pick another field, okay? Because if you don't give a damn about people and you want to go into management, you're going to hurt a lot of people along the way. If you have a genuine concern for someone, I think you can flex your style over and give them back what they're giving you in such a way as to bring out better communication. I don't think that is hypocritical.
It's like an adaptive.
Very much adaptive, yeah.
Leading towards success. It's
Right.
an adaptive
Right.
set of behaviors.
And when you said the word pretend, that's what kind of touches me off. I don't want it to be
I
a
hear you. I
pretense.
just
I
want
want it
to
to be a
clarify.
sincere gesture, movement on your part that you can listen like a D. Or you can talk like a C when you need to. Okay? The more successful we are at moving in and out of the different styles, the better off we're going to be as managers. All right? That's the general model. When you pick up the booklet and read it, it gives you another paradigm about your environment being hostile or friendly, and whether you can control it or you can't control it. And it gives you the same placements up here. Take a look through that, and in future classes, 2 weeks from tonight when we meet again, I'd like to talk some more about that of perspective on personality styles. If you didn't know your personality style, what typically happens? We expect everybody else to be like us. And when they're not, we wonder what's wrong with them. And the answer may be, moose breath, not a damn thing. They're just a little different. Okay? I could tell stories for hours on this stuff. I've been teaching it. Imagine a room of 50 people. And right about at this point, I say, okay, I want all the D's to go to that corner, all the I's, all the S's, all the C's. I'm going to give you each a piece of poster board and a couple of color crayons, and I want you to make up a logo and a motto for your personality style. And this is what happens, I swear to you, in every single case. The D's go back there, and there's usually not too many of them, and they sit around for about 30 seconds. And the next thing you know, they write on it and they look up, we're done. They're done that quick. And they're looking like everybody else like, what the hell's your problem? You look over at the eyes, you know what's going on? They are talking and having the best time and they don't get a damn thing done. Because they're not very results oriented. Or they are, but they enjoy the everybody listen to me. I got something to say. No, you ought to listen to this. And you listen to the eyes talk, and their voices escalate. Because one will say, let me tell you about the time I caught a fish this big. And the next thing you got, the guys, yeah, but I caught one this big. And they're just kind of outbidding each other. They don't get a whole lot done. What do you suppose is going on with the S's? That's where most of them are, you know. And they're standing around there not saying anything. Just looking at each other. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what to do. You got any ideas? I don't know. Why don't you take charge? No, I don't want to take charge. That's what goes on. Nothing. Nobody wants to take charge. What do you think the C's are doing? The C's come running back to you and say, have you got a protractor? Do you have a triangle? I need a plate because I need to draw a circle. Why don't you just draw a circle? No, it's got to be a real circle. You know, perfect. And they come up with incredible detail and wonderful presentations, but they never finish because they're too caught up in the details. And that's the kind of behaviors you see with the personality types. And when you can start recognizing that in people, you use their strengths and help them compensate for the weaknesses or the disadvantages. And the same thing you and I. All right? I want you to learn these styles. I want you to talk with me about them recurringly throughout this course. And I'll bring in more examples as we go along. But let's kind of draw a quick conclusion to this. I know you haven't known me very long. But based on the little bit you have seen of me, what is my primary personality style?
Aye.
How many say aye? 4. Everybody say D. 2. S? What's that? Yes or no?
Sure.
1.
Yes.
C? Anybody think I'm a C? You think I'm a C?
You can put me down for I.
Put you down for an
I
I?
can fall in there.
Okay. Here's what my graph looks like. D-I-S-C. I'm a huge S, but you don't know it when you see me in the classroom. Because I know I have a role to play here. And part of my role has got to be somewhat entertaining. And I'm an I personality when I come into the classroom. And I do have the I part of my makeup, and I do enjoy, I love standing in front of the classroom and trying to get people to interact. But I got to tell you, every time I finish a class, particularly these night classes when they go for 2 or 3 hours, when I go home, I am completely exhausted. A natural I draws energy from that interaction. It drains me. I naturally want to go home and basically be quiet and alone with a vodka martini. Thank you very much. Okay? But think about this. I told you, you've got to be able to flex your style. What I am trying to do from the day you see me, the first time you interact with me, if you come by my office, I am trying to read you and be effectively interactive with you. And if you come in and you're real detailed and you're pulling out your schedule and your textbook and all your notes, I'm going to sit there and go with you and give you all the details and notes you want. If instead you come in and you, hey, big handshake, sit down and laugh and carrying on your big eye, I'm a big eye too, man. You like to fish? Here we go. I will mirror who you are to the extent that I can encourage our interaction. Not because I'm trying to be false, but because I'm trying to encourage better understanding. Okay? One last note. There are a couple of styles I want to point out. You don't see these often, but sometimes. Sometimes you find somebody with all 4 points way up high on the graph. Very unusual. We call this person Superman or Superwoman. This is someone who is in an environment where they're trying to do and be everything for everybody. This leads to burnout. When we identify this in people, we say, look, you need to re-examine your priorities. You can't be everything for everybody. Another pattern we find is a midline. All 4 points right close to the midline. This is a transition pattern. This usually indicates someone who is in a new environment or with new responsibilities and hasn't quite settled in to determining what is most important and least important. When we find people like this, we say, give it about 6 months and come back and take this thing again. And usually the points will drift out and you'll see a more clear pattern. Someone who's new to a job, new transfer in, just graduated college, don't know what they're doing, and frequently people who are in new relationships, we find that. That's not a bad thing at all. It just means you're probably in a relatively new environment and you're still trying to sort it out. Twice in my life I've found that pattern down there. Twice in 15 years. This is a person who has shut down and quit. On both of those occasions, after talking to that person, we found they were suicidal. We got them some help. Okay? Those are the strange ones. There's one other one. I'm part of it, but it's when you've got a really low D and everything else is somewhere up in here. ISC, CSI, something like that. What we have found with those people is that they are not a D personality until things go wrong. When things start getting completely out of control, they become a first-class son of a bitch. Jerk. Take charge, fix it. Once it's fixed, then this drops back down and they go back to being their normal self. Okay? So I think this stuff is interesting. I think it's extremely useful and valuable. And if you integrate it into your thought processes from now on, and you continue to go back and reacquaint yourself with this stuff, I think you're going to find yourself looking at people and enjoying the process more when you analyze them, not getting nearly as excited or antagonized or angry with people because of some of their behaviors. And just enjoying people more and enjoying working with people. And then occasionally when you do have to deal with someone who's being difficult, I think you have a tool in your hand that'll help you do that. All right? That's the DISC personality style in very brief format. Please, I encourage you to read about it. You will be writing about it on one of your competencies. And anything at all you want to ever talk about along this line, please let me know. One last concluding note. My wife and I will have been married 7 years in October. A long history there, but in fact we were next door neighbors 25, 30 years ago. Drifted apart, got reacquainted. Early when we were courting, of course I had to tell her all about this. I sat her down and made her take the DISC profile. And her pattern matched mine exactly to the number. And I've never met anybody in my life I am so compatible and happy with, even after 6.5 years, 7.5 years really. So I think there's some value to it in that regard as well. All right? Questions, comments, anybody? That concludes my presentation with respect to the DISC profile. Do you have any other issues on your mind? Anything you'd like to talk about?
We're at writing assignment 2
I think so.
and thinking about competency 2.
And thinking about competency too. I have been on the road. I just got back into town yesterday. I have not looked at this competency 1 yet. I know that they're in my canvas and I will be grading those beginning tomorrow and you'll start seeing scores come up.
And then is it a good strategy to sort of print out those, since you're giving us essentially the questions that will be on the tests in advance, just sort of print those out and answer them as we go along?
Good point. There are test banks, 2 test banks for the midterm, 2 test banks for the final, just out of the Kinnicky text. There's a total of, I don't know, 150, 200 questions for each exam. I think you should be printing those, dividing them up with a study group, and finding those answers now. and you should be rehearsing and reacquainting yourself with every one of those questions. And what will happen on the exam is I will, out of those, let's say 200 questions, I'll give you maybe 40 of them. But I figure you've had 6 weeks to learn the things. If you don't know them perfect in 6 weeks, I'm going to be very disappointed. And in fact, on some of them, I'm going to say, oh, on multiple choice question number 17, please explain that. So you can't simply memorize answers. You better know what you're talking about. Okay? That'll be the bulk of your exam. There'll be a few discussion questions, and there'll be some questions out of the Caproni text. Those study questions are also on Canvas as well to prepare. Thank you for reminding me. Anything else?
Has anybody in here already started a study group?
There is a meeting in here at 7, so you have a few minutes to put one or two together if you want to. I encourage it strongly. Yes, ma'am?
You had told me to remind you to discuss internships.
Internships. Trying to remember the context in which we were talking about them.
I was discussing in my paper that it was something that I didn't see included in the program that I was interested in doing after graduation before.
Okay, I recall now. First place, internships are absolutely, I think, a necessity unless you've already got a job that's on a career track. And if you're working full-time, it's tough to find an internship, but it's not impossible. And in fact, it may be possible with your employer to do additional hours there or even incorporate it as part of your job. What you're looking for is to acquaint yourself with what takes place in this job. Ideally, how do they solve problems? How do they communicate with people? But I think the emphasis should be right now in scanning the environment and finding those internships wherever they may be and cultivating the ability to develop them. That means a first-class resume. It means first-class attention to appearance and presentation. You have a video to do. Will you be able to see yourself on video? That's a humbling experience. I didn't realize I was so damn fat, you know. Anyway, I think if you will do that, we can find those internships. And I think they're all over the place. I think there are a lot of employers who would love to have someone who would give them 5 to 15 hours a week, who's really able to work on their own. And part of this program is in your capstone course, you identify an employer, you work with them on a particular problem, you present a solution to that problem, and you present that to the class. So I would explore internships with a vengeance. If you want some specific direction or just want to ask questions more in detail, I'd love to hear them. Does that give you enough information for tonight for what I said?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yes, ma'am?
I'm already employed, but one of the, I know about the internship portion of this degree. So one of the things that I've done has been to take it upon myself to volunteer in different departments prior to having to get the internship. And also learn how to do some of the things that other people get paid for on my own time, so that when I have to approach a different department about an internship, I hadn't even thought about presenting them a resume, but I can present them either a resume or a brag file and say, this is what I've been working on, and I'd like to come and work for you for 5 or 10 hours. I've already talked it over with my current supervisor, and he's like, oh, yes, we'll have to arrange that. So for me, if I can work with these people ahead of time, and they know that that's what I'm looking for, some of them are already starting to think about maybe what they could have me do, and I'm like, no, it's further down the road. I'm not ready for it yet. So. Well,
a couple of things. As a student in this program, you are in a great position to go to any employer and present yourself as a student and say, I've been tasked with writing a paper about or doing an interview of a company or an employer like you, and just make yourself up 5 or 6 open-ended questions, and if most of them will give you a few minutes to chat, immediately you've made a relationship if you make a positive impression, right? And then you can go back and say, I'm going to be looking for an internship in the future, or do you have any work I could be doing even on a volunteer basis for the next few months? All kind of ways to open those doors. There is a process called evaluation by resume. Imagine that you work for me, and imagine that I told you to bring your resume into me every 6 months. What better be different every 6 months? You better have done more, taken on more responsibility, acquired more skills, solved more problems, dealt with difficulties, etc., with every successive resume. And so as we ask ourselves, How am I gonna allocate my time, because I never have enough of it? One of the things is, are you doing things that will be reflected in your resume? Okay? Anything else? Okay, it's been real. I'll see you in 2 weeks, I hope. Thank you.